with Diane Oxbury.
Well, the first thing I should say is there is a small chance of a shower as you go through the day, but most places should stay dry. It's dry and bright as we speak. There are some pretty decent spells of sunshine forecast. Every now and then the cloud cover will roll back on in, but it won't spoil the day. Wherever you are, it should be bright. The wind's much lighter than yesterday, and your top temperature, it's a pleasant 15 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Hiya. So where's the government keep all this money? Where does it keep it? Think about it. Think about it. There's talk. I mean, first of all, Alistair Darling's going to buy 8 banks for you and me. That'll make 9 in all, because we've already bought Northern Rock. He's going to buy chunks of, not all, but he's going to buy lumps of banks. And that's going to cost £50 billion. That's 50,000 million pounds. Just for the record, that's the cost of the National Health Service per year. So somewhere, the government that has been claiming parsimony for decades, we've got no money. We can't spend that, we can't spend... Well, we can't do that, we can't do... Oh, we can't do that, no, we can't do that. Pensioners, you'll just have to starve to death. We haven't got money to burn, you know. You're old and wrinkly, just die. It's cheaper, for God's sake. Stop fannying around with us. And stop going to hospital, costs a fortune. We've got no money for that. But they can spend £50,000 million buying pieces of 6 banks. Where was that money? Where did they keep it? Under a mattress? Where? I don't understand. Seriously, I don't understand. Now, it doesn't end there. They've already spent 20-something billion buying the whole of Northern Rock. Well, where was that money? You know what I mean? If I've got to go today and buy, I don't know, say I had to buy a new motor car, then I would be faced with a number of options. I can buy it on the Never Never, a variety of kinds, couldn't I? I could buy it on hire purchase, I could buy it on one of those credit sales, I could get a bank loan, but somewhere there would have to be a lump of money that would then be passed over to the owner of the car. Now, I might take it out of my own account and pigs might fly. I might take money out of my account and hand it over to them and they put it into their account. So the money would go from Bank A to Bank P. Bank P, yeah. Doesn't it just? I'm peed off with it, yeah. But it would go from Bank A to Bank B. Well, OK, it started in a bank, it ended in a bank. It's a 6-to-1 chance that it'll end up in the same bank it came from. I take it out of the bank of fools and gallivanters and put it in the bank of who? I don't know. Well, OK, that's just a simple transaction of £5,000 for a motor car. Where does the government keep its money? Presumably, I hesitate to say this because of the stupidity of it, but presumably in a bank. You would think, wouldn't you? Let's hope it's not the Icelandic one. I do like the idea that a bank in Iceland has frozen accounts. I'm sorry, it just sits rather... Do you think 9/10 of the bank in Iceland is underwater? It certainly looks that way at the moment. But anyway, the government is going to spend as much as this is some people's estimates, £200 billion lending money to banks. Now, the problem at the moment is that banks won't lend money to each other. I've listened to the reports, I've read the papers. The problem seems to be that banks won't lend money to each other. The implication of that is that what's going on here, and it's only deduction, I don't know. I would love, absolutely love, to hear your explanation of it, or anybody's explanation, because I can't fathom one. But presumably what is happening, instead of Bank A lending money to Bank B, because Bank B doesn't look too good in the eyes of Bank A, then the government will lend money that it's got on deposit with Bank A to Bank B. So where does the government keep its money? We hear, don't we, when the Falklands War broke out, that we dipped into the contingency fund. We did. When we invaded Iraq, twice, the government dipped into the contingency fund. This is their savings, basically. But where do they keep it? Do they keep it in the Bank of England? Well, the Bank of England isn't a trading bank, and anyway, they're now devolved from government. I am very, very confused. I don't understand. I'm not meant to understand. I'm just a little fat broadcaster, but it doesn't make any sense. And I would love to find out if you know where the government keeps its money. I'd like to find the mattress that it's in. Hi, Alan, says Lewis in Bolton. Hi, Alan. So the banks are in trouble, and the government have £50 billion of our tax money to bail them out. And don't forget the $30 billion already put into the system, and the $25 billion for Northern Rock, and the $20 billion to depose Saddam and profligate democracy. Well, profligate democracy. Well, the answer is, says Lewis in Bolton, we are clearly paying too much tax. If the government's got money in the bank, which it can use to buy the bank that it's got the money in, one is forced to conclude that something's going awry, isn't it? You tell me what it is. I've no idea. 0161 228 2255. You can talk about anything, by the way, but I am intrigued about all these billions of... If you're a millionaire now, you're poor. All these billions and billions and billions of pounds that the government seems to be able to put its hand on at short notice and say, oh yeah, no problem, just move it over there and give it him.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxbury.
Eamon and Diane.
Sunshine, the new Craig Cashfield Mealy.
I'm in that. I'll be the weather girl.
I want to be the weather girl.
It's set in, I think it's set in the 90s, so we had to do 90s wardrobe and 90s hair. It was just fantastic. I look no different.
Eamon and Diane and you.
And is the music does it still do it for you, Paul? Do you still go out and see bands now?
We still go and see a lot of the bands that are around from the 70s and so on. There's a lot of them making revivals now, really. We're actually going to see a band next week called Dr. Feelgood.
The station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
I know, that's the good news.
Back tomorrow morning from 6 at BBC Radio Manchester.
Dr. Feelgood. By God, that's going back a bit, isn't it? Deary, deary, mate. Oh, here we go. Even China's getting in on the act. China has cut interest rates amid market crisis. You just heard from Michelle in the news that the UK government, the UK National Bank, for want of a better term, the Bank of England, has just... Why is it the Bank of England? Why isn't it the Bank of UK? Anyway, they've just... It says here, dramatically slashed interest rates by 0.5%. You know, I mean, I'm sure in the machinations of money that's quite startling, but 0.5% doesn't seem that much of a slash to me. I've just realised what I've said, but I've not realised what I mean, so that's all right. Ian says, I used to enjoy watching the popular folk group The Spinners on television in the 70s. They had a series in which they travelled to a different location each week and did the show from there. It is what I think as good, honest, popular entertainment. No hype, just raw talent, well delivered. Can you tell me first if it was a BBC show? I can't remember having adverts halfway through, so I think it was on BBC One. And second, if it was a BBC show, do you know if it will be made available to watch again, either on the archive website or DVD? Ian, I have no idea. None whatsoever. I suspect not, because they don't really revive old programmes from the 70s unless they are as remakes. And frankly, I'm not sure that the Spinners are even still together. They were the Liverpool group. In my Liverpool home, and all that. In my Liverpool home. In my days of enjoying folk music, I kind of enjoyed the Spinners, but I don't think they're still together. I could be wrong. They've got CDs and albums, which are probably still available. But you just need to type the Spinners into a website and make sure you get the right set of Spinners. And presumably they'll have copies of DVDs, CDs and all that gubbins ready, willing and able. The other thing to do is there's an online shop on the BBC website, but I don't think they've got them. I was actually in a BBC shop yesterday. I had to go to Birmingham to record some stuff for this documentary we're making about the salt mines. I know, all the way to Birmingham for that is ludicrous. Anyway, I had to go on the BBC in Birmingham, which is in an interesting building called the Mailbox, which has got all kinds of posh shops in it. Anyway, I went there and recorded it, and they've got a shop there, but I didn't notice anything by the spinners. But frankly, I wasn't looking. 0161228 2255. If you've something to say, feel free. Is it the job of the government to fight for Britons who decided to put their money into a foreign bank? It is interesting that, isn't it? A number of people have put their money, we're told 300,000 people have deposited their money in a foreign bank, vis-a-vis this Icelandic bank, which trades on the internet. So people have gone to internet banking with an Icelandic bank, and they've lost their money. Or they would have done had the government not decided that it will bail them out, and it will include them in the £50,000. So if you got £50,000, you were guaranteed anyway. But the government have now said that on this one occasion, they're not going to make it a policy, but on this one occasion, people who are banking with that particular bank will have their deposits, the whole of their deposits, covered by government guarantee. The trouble is, if the government said, well, we'll cover the banks that are the British banks, that makes life very difficult for people, because HBOS, is that a British bank? I don't know. I've no idea. Or what's the other one? The HSBC, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Is that an English bank? It's very hard to work them out. The banks are international entities these days. So I suppose the government's kind of hoist on its own petard there. But down in Manchester said, re the goalkeeper, do we know whether he'll be paying any compensation to the grieving family? If so, how much and how long? If not, why not? Well, the answer is that his insurance company, because it was a motoring offence, his insurance company will be paying for all the costs that family incur as a result of the road traffic accident. It's possible, although I didn't read it anywhere in the paper, it's possible that the judge in the case decided that compensation should be paid almost like a fine by the guilty party, on this occasion the goalkeeper. But given that the insurance companies were going to fund anything that was required by the injured family, I suspect that's unlikely, because they'll be fully compensated to the extent of civil law, which will be quite a lot of money. They won't get much for the kids, because dead kids, well, frankly, they're 10 a penny. They'll get nowt for them. But the gentleman, the father, as it were, the male in the car, who's still in a wheelchair, unable to get around much, he'll get all the compensation, all his medical bills and all of that, and loss of earnings and all sorts of other stuff will be compensated. So they will be compensated by the insurance company. And even, and this hasn't been suggested, but even if the motorist wasn't insured, the goalkeeper that is, the Motor Insurers Bureau would cough up the same sum in any event. So yes, they'll be compensated. Unlikely that the goalkeeper would have to pay anything towards it, other than the premium he paid for his motor insurance. But I repeat, they won't get much for the dead kids, because everybody knows they're worthless. Yeah, I know it hurts, but that's it. That's how it is. Dead kids, worth not a carrot. If you're gonna have a bad moment in your car and kill someone, kill a kid, because frankly, it's cheaper. Or some wrinkly with about 3 years of life left, because they're cheap enough as well. But whatever you do, don't kill a working person. Lord above, that'll cost you a fortune. 0161 228 2255. Terry in Tilsley says, so the government's going to lend banks 50 billion quid. Will they be charging them £30 for the letter to tell them that? That's the thing, isn't it? That is the thing. The government is going to shovel money at banks like there's not tomorrow. But it won't be cutting their costs down, will it? In fact, the banks are all bunging their costs up. All of them. They are. The interest rates, despite the interest rate cut, which has just happened, but all the banks are putting their rates up. Why? Well, why wouldn't they? They're looking for someone to pay for all their mistakes, and who else can they use but the gormless mugs called customers? Brian says at this morning's news conference, Gordon Brown said the money for the banks would be raised by borrowing. So that's where they're getting it from. How they or us are going to pay it back is another question altogether. Well, in terms of the money that they're lending to the banks, one would hope they'll pay it back by the increase in value of the bank. Just imagine, if you were a brave capitalist at the moment, if you had any sense at all, you would be buying shares in the bank, particularly if you can take a long-term view. If you bought shares in the bank today, OK, in a fortnight, in a month, perhaps even in 6 months' time, they will be less in value than you paid for them. If you buy £100,000 worth of shares today in a bank, one of the high street banks, you buy £100,000 worth of shares, this time 6 months hence, April next year, your £100,000 may well be worth £70,000, and on the face of it looks like a damn stupid investment. But in 3 years' time, it'll probably be worth £200,000, which means you'll make a profit of £100,000 over 3 years, which is £35,000 a year. Not a bad profit. But you've got to hold tight. You've got to be prepared to buy cheap, sell dear. That takes time and balls. Just gone 12 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines. Michelle Adamson.
Interest rates have been cut by 0.5% to 4.5%. It's been announced by the Governor of the Bank of England. Cuts have also been announced at the same time in the United States, Europe and China. A pub in North Manchester has been forced to close after the landlord failed to deal with fighting, drug-taking and other antisocial behaviour. The Moston on Hillier Street North in Harper Hay had its licence taken away after police and local people reported a rise in crime in recent months. More than 100 MPs are trying to change the law in England and Wales to ban smacking children, but the government is opposed to the idea. In Scotland, smacking children under the age of 3 is already against the law. And Manchester's weather staying mostly dry and bright this afternoon, highs of 15 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
If you're travelling on the M62 and you're on the westbound carriageway, better news. That accident that was around Junction 9 at Winwick has now been cleared of the carriageway. The vehicles have been recovered and lanes reopened just before Junction 9. And if you're travelling around Lately Common, the East Lancs Road on the A580 is still congested around Warrington Road because of roadworks nearby. And in Heald Green, Turves Road still closed, again because of a serious accident between Conway Road and Vernon Close. Don't forget, if you can update me further today, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester.
The coppers get a kicking in the papers today. Dave in Bury points this one out. I've just been reading about another copper who's been having trouble keeping his truncheon under control. I'm sorry. That's nice, I like that. I've just been reading about another copper who's been having trouble keeping his truncheon under control. In today's Express, this Bobby's been accused of having sexual intercourse between August 2003 and August 2004. He went on to have further intercourse with the same woman between September 2004 and January 2005. With these marathon sessions, I can only conclude that the police force must be issuing officers with Viagra, as it appears they're all at it. I'm happy with a 10-minute fumble under the sheets, he says, but 12 months? No way. 10 minutes? What do you do with the other 9.5? Anyway, this is the copper, and it just for grammatical and semantic, it says between August 2003 and 2004. It doesn't say from. It rather changes the story. I'm sorry to spoil it. Why are the taxpayers bailing out privately owned banks, asks Russ from Lee. Do they not have insurance against this type of occurrence? And will the fat cats still get their big Christmas bonuses? Well, they don't have insurance. There are not many companies that insure against loss of value in the company, because the insurance you have is the gamble that you take on the internet, on the stock exchange anyway. Mike says, I guess that if a bank pays tax to the UK government on its profits, etc., then it should be included under the scheme. Indeed. Peter, also in Lee, hi.
Hello, Alan.
What have you got?
A bit of praise for the young kids of today.
Okay.
I work for social services, and I drive one of the buses. And yesterday I was in Lawton at the community centre putting a service user in a wheelchair on the bus. And we tried to get out of the building when the heavens opened. about 3 o'clock, and it come down very, very heavily. And out of nowhere, 2 young girls come up with umbrellas and said, would you like a hand? And they helped us to the bus to keep us and the service user dry. And they got absolutely soaked. But it was just a nice change that...
Yeah, isn't that fantastic?
I don't know where these girls come from. Disappeared.
Well, they just appeared and disappeared. Perhaps they were just angels.
That's right. Thanks very much. And it was unreal. It was a nice change.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for that. We don't get many opportunities to say thank you to people, so thank you for that. Well done, then.
It was really well learned. It deserved that, because the heavens absolutely opened.
And I don't suppose the Daily Mail will be saying now that all children are wonderful because 2 of them have done something nice, rather like they say all children should be locked up because 2 of them did something horrible, but never mind, it's a balance. Good on you, thank you for telling us. Well done them. 0161 228 2255. And well done their parents. I fall for the old idea that we must blame the parents. So on this occasion we'll not blame them, we'll give them a wonderful time. Because they did it all right. Just looking down here, David has sent me a whole thing about the Spinners. A 1960s folk group from Liverpool. They were unrelated to the Spinners, the American soul band, the Motown Spinners, the Detroit Spinners, or any other Spinners you care to mention. Mick Groves, born in Salford. I never knew that. Tony Davis, born in Blackburn. I think I knew that. Huey Jones, Cliff Hall, who was born in Cuba. He was the bloke that stood at the back playing them dead tall drums. Yeah, they did the folk club. Just looking now. There we are. They retired in 1988 after 30 years together, although they led the community singing at the 1989 FA Cup final and played some Christmas shows in the early 90s. Some members of the group still perform, but Hall has retired to Australia, but he died in 2008. So no, they're not still together, and they're unlikely to get together again now. Well, certainly one of them won't. So that's what we know about the Spinners, and yes, they did do a television series. And with regard to the Spinners television series, I heard a rumour that the BBC were going to make available a vast archive of television shows on a website. With your massive BBC resources, can you tell me if this is still going to happen? Well, the word still implies that it was. I have no knowledge of it, and frankly don't know how I would find out. It'd mean asking somebody, one of the suits in the BBC, and frankly, the less time I spend talking to the suits, the better. I'm usually in there getting me bum kicked, so I'm not aware of the BBC intending to put its archive, the whole of its archive, on the internet, or up for sale. Can't see the sense in that, or indeed the work involved. But you never know. You never know. And I suspect by now, the way that television programmes have been recycled on the satellite channels, all kinds of stuff, if the Spinners were going to be recycled, they would have been already, I presume. But there are difficulties, because in the old days, when they bought the rights to music and the like for particular performances, and they bought the recording rights of concerts and things, then you buy them and you pay contractually for a specific use. You can't then just say, OK, 3 years later, we'll play it again, because you're just not allowed. I tell you where it was demonstrated most noticeably. Do you remember The Professionals? With Doyle and Bodie, I think it was. It doesn't matter who it was, but I think it was them. And The Professionals, for many, many years, would not be available. You can now watch them on the internet, but Martin Shaw, one of the characters, one of the actors in The Professionals, it was said, would never allow them to be replayed because he wouldn't sign the contract to give them permission to repeat them. And he wouldn't sign it. He said, no, I don't want to do that. And that's the end of it. And he wouldn't do it for years and years and years because he didn't want to get typecast. The other fella who never really did anything else apart from that, I think he made a film about the SAS that nobody watched, but that's all he did. So he was quite happy to have it, but Martin Shaw said, no, I'm not doing it. I've moved on. And he wouldn't let them because they have control, because you sign a contract to act in a performance. That doesn't mean that the people who recorded it and filmed it own it. You still own the rights, other than the rights that you've sold. So in order to show things from yesteryear, They've got to go back to all those actors and the producers, if they weren't employees, and all of that, and renegotiate and try to get the rights to use it. So it's not as easy as you think. So the idea of them putting everything on the on up for sale is probably not that easy and not that imminent. Neil in Bebington says the money the government is going to lend will come out of the kitty. He's called Humphrey and he lives at number 10. And Jeff in Lim. Hiya, Jeff.
Hi, Alan, how are you?
I'm all right. I like the idea.
I wish I knew Humphrey.
Quite so. He's all right now. He's stopped nicking the milk. Do you remember that? Watch out, there's a Humphrey about. Good God.
Oh, God.
What have you got for us?
You was on about the financial crisis before.
Yes.
I don't even pretend to understand it, and sometimes, like you, I wish I did. But it's just too big a thing. I think a lot of it is smokescreen, in as they blame this, they blame that, or they blame the other. But the one common denominator in it all, although politicians won't admit it, is the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the connection with everything. In as that, about 18 months ago, I think they knew then that Bush was going to lose power, Obama, as long as they don't fix the elections again, as long as all the coloured people can vote, where they couldn't last time because there wasn't enough voting machines. But I think when they saw Obama promised to fetch the troops out of Iraq. That was his main thing. It wasn't long ago that Brown was on about fetching the troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. It originally, as I know, about 18 months ago, the Spanish did. They fetched theirs, and theirs was one of the first economies actually to collapse. The French was never in favour of the war, the first one or the second one, but now they've actually got troops out there. So to me, the connecting thing, now where it all falls in place, I don't know, but the connecting thing is the war in Iraq. And I just think there's a lot of people at the moment very, very nervous of the fact that the war's there. They don't like to admit that this war's breaking countries, or if you're going to pull troops out, then you're threatening the peace in the world and everything else. But to me, that's the connecting factor with it all.
That's an interesting thought. I mean, somebody said in an email to me yesterday on an unrelated matter, said if it's got feathers, a beak, webbed feet, and it floats on water, chances are it's a duck. And you've just done that, haven't you? You just stacked all the blocks up and said, look, these blocks all stacked together. You know, this country, that country, this country, that country. These had nothing to do with it, and they're fine. It may well be that it is entirely coincidental.
I think a lot of it's smokescreen. I mean, it's like the bird flu. We had the dead swan. I mean, I know it's a different issue, for goodness sake, but we had the dead swan in Scotland in the middle of nowhere. Now, what's happened to the bird flu? All of a sudden, that's disappeared off the radar.
Well,
and we're all going to die from that.
We were indeed all going. I personally, in the last 2 decades, have died a number of times. The first one was herpes. That saw me off. I was definitely getting that. And then AIDS. That was going to finish me off. Bird flu and all kinds of other vile diseases were going to finish me off. But now, apparently, I'm going to boil to death because the earth will get warm.
It's politics affair, Alan.
The politics of pap.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
All right, mate.
I think this is very worrying, though, this collapse and where they're getting this money from. And it's like pie in the sky, isn't it? Oh, we'll borrow $1 billion from here and $1 billion from there. Well, I think the common denominator is the war in Iraq.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, I asked at the beginning, where does the government get its money from in order to pay all these banks this money? And it would appear from what people are saying is they borrow it. Well, who off? You know, are they borrowing it off the bank to lend it back to them? Could you lend me 50 quid? I'll give you 50 quid for it.
Paper money, Alan.
Well, that's what it is, isn't it? There's nothing really changed here.
There's nothing factual about it at all.
It's like, I mean, you're blaming it all on the war. What others are blaming it on is this idea that we paid men in suits, spivs, basically, to sell mortgages, and we gave them a commission. And so they sold them to anyone that walked past the shop, whether they had any money or not.
I think that was a smokescreen to disguise the fact.
Yes,
I do. I think these people, for want of a better word, they are clever people. These are people that deal purely in money. And these people have gone out, they've realised they're on a loser, and they've started to sell it to anybody. And then they're using this as a smokescreen to say, oh no, this is wrong, it's all about us, we've sold too many mortgages. These people don't make mistakes like that.
But they're not mistakes, you see. This is the problem. They're not. What they did, I mean, all these, they're now being called toxic loans. But what they did, they rolled them into big packages, so complicated that even the people selling them onto other banks didn't know. Because a bank's like a bookmaker. He, the banker, Bank A, doesn't stand the risk. When you borrow £1 million to launch a business, the bank's at risk of losing their £1 million, because the only thing they've got is your house, which is worth 50,000, and your, if you like, integrity. They've got nothing else. So they don't stand the whole of that £1 million. What they do is they sell parcels of that risk to other banks. So if you go to the wall, they pay out the 100,000, but they get 20,000. Sorry, they pay out 100,000, but they get 100,000 off another 9 banks. So they're not as big a risk as it appears. Just like a bookmaker, they lay it all off. And the problem at the moment is that the bookmaker, the banker, can't lay it off because the other bank won't lend him the money.
Well, I'll give you another name in the equation then. Mark Leeson.
Ooh, my word, that's going back some. But yes,
but there was
a man who you remember pyramid selling?
I do.
Right, well, banking is like pyramid selling. The guy at the bottom, Mark Leeson, who's making deals that look like they are profitable, gets paid by commission. And he phrases the deal so that he gets the commission. The boss above him isn't going to check too hard, because if he looks at the deal and says, hang on a minute, we didn't make money on that, we lost, you're not having any commission. The reason he won't do that is because he gets commission, because Gleason's made commission. The bloke above Gleason gets commission, all the way to the chairman of the bank. They've got hundreds of deals, they've all made profit, none of them have they made a loss, but they've all been phrased in a way to make it look like they get profit, so he walks away with £100 million bonus on duff deals. But no one wants to check, because all of them are getting paid. You bring in a firm of accountants to look at it, and the firm of accountants says, this is all crook, and they say, get out, we'll get a different firm of accountants. Until they get one that doesn't spot it. You can laugh, if only it wasn't funny. Have a good day, Jeff.
Have a good day, Alan.
Ta-ra, mate. 0161 228 2255. The world is owned by charlatans and thieves. Was it ever thus? Indeed, it was. If the government's rescuing people who've banked with the Icelandic bank, will Kerry Katona be okay now? Very good. Very, very good. And probably not. But thank you for that. And again, I have heard you show you die most days. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, let's get all the terrible gags out of the way, and then we can get down to some good stuff. Or not. I started to say earlier that the coppers are getting a kicking again today in the press. But it's a cracking story. There is a rider to it. I'll just give you the story first of all. It's on the front page of the Manchester Evening News. I mean, they're getting a kicking elsewhere, but that's all about, and I'm stealing this phrase, it's all about a couple of police officers who've had a bit of trouble keeping their truncheons in their trousers. But that's another story. But this is police ordered a family out of their car on the M6 because they wrongly thought it was not insured. Stephen Farndon and wife Jane had to walk up the motorway slip road with their 2 children carrying a baby grandson as police brought traffic to a halt. The bemused couple from Sale grabbed what they could carry, including the baby's buggy and clothing, and watched in disbelief as their car was towed away. Police pulled them over onto the slip road because a number plate recognition system had flagged their car up as having no insurance. The insurance had been renewed, but the company had failed to notify the national computer system. Mr. Farndon said, "The police officer read me rights. We just couldn't believe it was happening. The next thing, we were walking up the slip road like a bunch of refugees. It was surreal." Okay. Question. Do you support the idea of an identity card? I ask because 200,000 identifying documents like driving licence, birth certificates, those things, are unaccounted for, being fiddled with every single year, 200,000. Now we find that the DVLA system, where all our motoring details are held, has a flaw in it. The flaw is, like everything else in our world, it's reliant on human beings. As will be the ID card system. Whether you're in favour of the ID card system in principle or not is irrelevant. Would you be prepared to have all your identity information on a system operated by computerised idiots like the DVLA? Just gone 20 to 1 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines, Michelle Adams.
Interest rates have been cut by 0.5%. The reduction to 4.5% has been announced by the Governor of the Bank of England. Similar cuts have been announced at the same time in the United States and in Europe. Schools are being sent guidance from the government on how to prevent pupils from being drawn into terrorism and extremism. A pub in North Manchester has been forced to close after the landlord failed to deal with fighting, drug taking and other antisocial behaviour. And Manchester's weather mostly dry and bright this afternoon with highs of 15 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Traffic in the lately common area of Greater Manchester still quite heavy on the East Lancs around Warrington Road because of roadworks. Thanks to Roy for your updates. And in Heald Green, Turves Road's just been reopened, we've been told by the police. There was a serious collision earlier today between Conway Road and Vernon Close, but the police have now reopened that stretch once again to traffic. Now, the tram stations at Piccadilly and Piccadilly Gardens are still closed for the next 7 weeks whilst engineering works take place on the tracks. Services will run between Bury and Altrincham every 6 minutes and between Eccles and Victoria every 12 minutes. And if you can update me further, call in today on the travel line. The number's 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester, Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Good afternoon. The International Olympic Committee says it intends to retest doping samples from the Beijing Games. It wants to check for traces of a new blood-boosting drug called Sera. With the details, here's our Olympic correspondent, Gordon Farquhar.
What they're looking at here is a new test for third-generation EPO. It's a blood-boosting drug. It allows more oxygen to be carried in the system. It aids stamina. And it's that they believe that they've got a strong test for. At the moment, cyclists from this year's Tour de France are having their samples retested already. The French testing laboratory has found 2 more cyclists who are cheating using this new substance that's called Sera. And now the IOC is going to do the same, and they're going to talk to WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, to create a protocol for this, which basically means, to have a legal format for them doing the retesting, but they say it will be a substantial number of samples across all sports, not just cycling.
Oldham striker Lee Hughes has told BBC Radio Manchester about his ambitions to return to a higher level of football, and he thinks he can achieve that at Boundary Park. Hughes is now in his 2nd season with Oldham, but already knows about playing in the top 2 divisions from his time with Coventry and West Brom.
I want to play in the Championship. Hopefully, with Oldham. I think everyone's ambitious at the club, especially if we keep the older players, the experienced players fit. Definitely, I think we've got a great chance, especially with the younger players last year. They've had a lot of experience playing, they've played a lot of games, so with their experience now, that we'll have a good chance.
Bury manager Alan Neil believes Andy Bishop is beginning to reproduce some of last season's form that resulted in interest from scouts. After scoring twice on Saturday, Bishop scored the only goal last night as the Shakers beat local rivals Stockport in the Johnston Paint Trophy.
He's fantastic. I have to say that the last 2 games, he looks probably back to his best, and probably you'd say the same, that before that he hasn't felt physically as good as he could possibly be, but on Saturday and tonight he looks a handful.
And Bury and Rochdale will find out on Saturday who they'll face in the Northern Area quarter-finals of the competition. West Ham insists they won't be adversely hit by financial problems, despite their chairman being a major shareholder in an Icelandic bank, which has been rescued by the country's government. The club insists the Hammers are not for sale, but admit that they will have to sell players in order to sign new ones. An FA board member has moved to ease fears that the Premier League is facing financial crisis. Yesterday, the FA chairman, Lord Triesman, warned that a combined debt estimated at £3 billion was a tangible danger to English clubs. However, the Ipswich chairman, David Sheepshank, says there's no problem with clubs having debts if they can service them.
Football is not immune to the problems going on globally, but I think we need to get a proportionate response. There's a frightening number that's been mentioned by Lord Treesman yesterday in terms of the aggregate debt of Premier League clubs, but there's equally a huge amount of income, and the important thing about debt is whether you can service the debt.
And Steve Ganson and Ashley Klein will be England's representatives on the referees panel for the Rugby League World Cup in Australia. The full-time officials were in charge of all the Super League playoff matches this season. Also making the trip will be touch judge James Child.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
Rochdale travel to Lincoln on Friday evening. We've got the match covered in the all-new Manchester Sports from 7.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. How are you? 0161 228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And you can text, of course, on 07786 206 951. I started to tell you about the story from the evening news about the family that was turfed out of their car on the motorway, and then the traffic was stopped so that they could walk from their car up the motorway slipway to comparative safety, because the police officers didn't do anything wrong. To be fair to them, they get a report, they see a vehicle, for some reason they check its identity, the registration number and the like, and it is found to be without insurance. We would want the police to stop that vehicle and turf the people out of it and confiscate the vehicle. Of course we would. But equally, the people who were driving the car can't be blamed either. They'd done absolutely everything they're required to do, including insure their car. And it was just the system behind it, upon which the police were relying, that was faulty. I suppose the advice to all of us is to carry our insurance documents with us. But who the hell does? Answer, well, not me. It's the system that's flawed, and the system is absolutely reliant on computers, on radio communications, and a human being. Exactly the system that the identity card will rely upon. That's for sure. They're not going to. There's not going to be some other system that's been invented. A police officer who stops you in the street may well say to you, "Can you identify yourself?" Now, I know that the government's saying that when the ID card comes in, there won't be a requirement to carry it, but mark my words, if it comes in within 5 years, it'll be a requirement to carry it. We're not stupid. We know what a bunch of screwy crooks the government can be. We know how they lie to us to get their own way. We know that. We're not stupid. So if it comes in, if they finally get everybody to agree, or get enough people to agree that it comes in, then undoubtedly, before long, you'll have to carry it. Why the hell would we have it otherwise? Exactly. So it'll come in. And that will mean that within 5 years of it coming in, a copper will be able to stop you in the street and say, "Can I see your ID card?" And your ID card doesn't match the one they've got on file, and you're wheeled off to jail. What else would happen? They're not going to do anything else, are they? They're going to wheel you off to jail. And you're going to get a night in the slammer because some tosspot in government has pressed the wrong button when putting your ID card details down. That's the reality. Sorry, but that's the reality. You cannot trust large computerised systems because, A, they're very complicated, and B, they're reliant on some cretin of a bloke sat there pushing buttons. Russ in Leeds says the government is to borrow £50 billion. Which bank will they use? Yeah, I've got the same problem. I can't work it out either. Good morning, Alan. I don't know about the Spanish economy collapsing, but one of the strongest banks at the moment, according to a report last week, is the Spanish bank Santander. The reason being is that its lending limits are strictly controlled by the straitjacket of government regulation. A lesson for a lot of governments there, says David in Crumpsall. Dean in Warrington, hi.
Hi there. How are you, Alan?
I'm very well.
Good. Just a really quick question. I've been listening to your show this dinner time, and I was wondering, if the banks aren't going to lend other banks money, does that mean they've got the fear of not getting it back? And if so, how come the government is stupid enough to lend the money in the first place?
I'm not sure it's the fear of not getting it back. If you imagine, if we can turn it into some other product and call it wholesale and retail, yeah? Now, banks are involved in both wholesale and retail. Now, if I've got 100 cars and I'm a wholesaler, if somebody comes along and says, I'll have 5 of them cars off you, they're going to want it at a lower price because they're going to sell them on and want to make a profit. Are you still with me?
Yes, yeah, I am, yeah.
But if the bank says, you're not having them because I'm going to sell them wholesale, I'm going to sell them retail, the bank gets more money per car.
Yes, they'll get a greater profit.
Well, they'll get a greater profit per vehicle. Now, banks make their living by lending money. That's all they do. They lend it to the city, they lend it to companies, they lend it to the government, they lend it to you and me, they lend it to all sorts of people. It's not their money, really. It's the money that people have deposited with it, but they lend money. So if they can lend that money at 4% above base rate, then that's great. What they normally do is they keep hold of their money, they lend it at 4% above base rate, and they borrow it off another bank at 1% above base rate.
Right, so they're getting it. I understand now, but I was wondering if they had the fear, because I was wondering whether there's a fear of actually lending the money and not being able to get it back because the banks might go into liquidation, and if so, how come the government would be bailing them out instead?
Well, there might be a bit of that, but from what I've read, it appears that they're not prepared to lend money to other banks, so the other banks can go and do business with it. They'd rather do the business themselves.
And then hand out loans, obviously, but there isn't any lending at the moment.
Well, exactly. They're not lending to each other.
They're not lending to each other, but they're lending to public.
Yes, if you wanted today to borrow money, they would lend it to you, providing, I mean, they're a little more circumspect than they have been. They won't lend it to anyone that just walks past like they have been doing. But if you wanted to borrow money today, they would lend it to you. But first of all, you would have to convince them that you could afford to pay them back, and you'd be paying a lot more interest than had you borrowed it just a short time ago. Even though the Bank of England has just reduced its borrowing rate, that I promise you, you are unlikely to read in your paper tomorrow that the major lenders have reduced their borrowing rate.
Right.
They'll be sucking that money in and keeping it.
Oh, fantastic. So,
yeah, because they're a bunch of crooks, yeah.
A bunch of crooks. And another quick question. Sorry, my wipers are going. Another quick question is, how come George Bush and Tony Blair are jumping off the bandwagon and throwing someone else in power to get all the flack for it?
Well, George Bush doesn't have a choice because he's only allowed to serve 2 terms.
It seems to me that they're jumping off just at the right time, so everyone else gets the problem.
Well, he doesn't have a choice, and frankly, Tony Blair didn't have a choice either, because everyone was sick of him.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to be that way for a long while. I reckon at least 3 years we're going to be struggling.
You may be right. Let us hope you're not, but you may be right. Good on you, mate.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Alan.
day. That's Dean in Warrington. If you've something to say, you're more than welcome.
Throughout the US presidential election of 2008, the candidates have talked of the future and of something else.
221 years ago, in a hall that still stands.
America's seen tough times before. We've always known.
To continue the long march of those who came before us. A march
Looks not to the future, but to the past for solutions that have failed us before.
To truly understand the American election, you need to look at the past. The American Future, a history by Simon Sharma, starts Friday evening at 9 on BBC Two.
Who gives a toss? 0161 228 2255. It's America. Let them have their election. Who cares? Well, frankly, we have to, because if they say jump, we ask how high. London's blue chip, not a clue, London's blue chip share index staged a dramatic turnaround today after the Bank of England's surprise decision to cut rates by 0.5%. Banks, retailers and house builders led the rebound on the London market, with the FTSE 100 index fighting back from an earlier plunge of 7% at its low point. HBOS was the leading riser, ahead 60% at one stage, followed by the NatWest owner, Royal Bank of Scotland, up 30%, as the rate cut also added to cheer over the government's £50 billion rescue deal. So there you are, everybody in the city is dancing round in happiness, and we're all screwed. Karen in Warrington. Hello, Karen.
Hi. My problem is I'm a driving instructor in Warrington, and the government has decided that it's going to sort of revamp the system and close down all the driving test centres, certainly a large proportion of them. Basically, about 8 years ago, there was an EU directive concerning motorbikes, which is what Ruth Kelly has been doing recently. They were supposed to be building MPTC centres so that the motorbikes...
That's motorcycle test centres?
Yeah, motorcycle test centres. So that the swerve test that the EU were asking everybody to do could be done off-road.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be done at 50 kilometres an hour, which is 31 miles an hour. So they didn't want it doing on the road, even though we've spoken to police chiefs who said they wouldn't book anybody for doing 31 miles an hour. So they rolled out an MPTC programme, which is going to cost about £165 million. They've been unable to get it up and running. They've got about 38 centres up and running, and the government has been not able to implement all 66 centres by the beginning of October. So they've now had to knock the date back to next year, about March, April next year, because they've been unable to do it. The government now is going to get fined huge sums of money for not having it implemented by the EU.
Yeah.
And they're closing the centres off. Warrington would have cost about £8,000, £10,000 to keep open per year. Very small amount of money for about it's about £400,000 a year income for a very small amount of outgoing, if you're with me. The motorbike tests, there's only about 88,000 tests a year, which can't implement this programme. So they're making all the cars pay for it. The car tests are going up and up and up, and what the car tests are getting out of it is part of a motorbike test.
I mean, the difficulty you have as a driving instructor is that there's no shortage of people wanting to take the test. There's a lot of competition between driving schools. I don't have to tell you that.
No, that's fine, yeah.
But if they put it up to £100...
You still have to take it.
Well, not only would they have to take it, they'd still want to. They'll find the money somewhere. They might not find the money to pay you particularly or another ADI, but the government knows that if they made it £500, they'd still be queuing up to do it.
Yes.
So really, I don't know that you have a very strong card to play, Karen, against them.
No, to a degree not, but we do know as an industry that we're looking at more and more people driving illegally because they aren't actually taking the test.
We are aware of that. It does appear to be increasing. I'm not sure what the evidence is that driving without ever having taken the test is on the increase. I'm not sure of that, but certainly there are people who are avoiding some of the costs of driving by not taxing the car, not VAT, not MOTing it and all the other things. I'm not aware of any... I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm not anywhere aware of any increase in people who are driving illegally having never taken the test. There are a number of people... Do. Yeah, well, I mean, fine, but I don't know that number of tests has gone down, has it?
It is decreasing, yes.
Is it?
They did expect about another 80,000 tests to have taken place last year. So the DSA themselves are seeing a decrease in the amount of tests that are being taken. The point I'm trying to make is that the extra cost to the general public, and people aren't aware that every time they pay for a car test, they're also paying partially for a bike test. And the DSA misappropriating money like nobody's business. They spent 15 grand on key rings for the examiners when they got their charter mark, the new charter mark. She's just bought a £17 million listed building and moved her head office from one side of the road to the other and furnished it with designer furniture. The amount of money that's been misappropriated on unnecessary items that could have been spent to preserve test centres within local areas. Warrington is the fastest growing town in Europe, has 400,000 people live here. Sorry, 200,000 people live here, and it has an income to its test centre of 400,000.
You point up a problem. I don't know that we can find a solution here, but the public know about it now. Thank you for that. Sorry to cut you off in your prime.
Hi, join me, Becky Want, today from 2 o'clock live from the Woodford Garden Centre on BBC Radio Manchester.
I didn't think they were garden centres at the time of the year. I thought they became Christmas emporia. But the only trees they sell are plastic things with fairies on.
95.1 FM.
DAB Digital Radio.
And the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, the Chancellor is defending the bank bailout. Schools will be given advice on how to prevent pupils being drawn into terrorism.
The IOC prepares to retest drug samples from Beijing.
Shouldn't be a bad day today. So far it's dry and it's bright. Fingers crossed that's the way it stays, with light winds and a top temperature of 15 Celsius.
And traffic through Lately Common on the East Lancs Road still heavy in both directions around the junction with Warrington Road because of roadworks nearby.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Adamson. Interest rates have been cut by 0.5%. The snap decision, a day earlier than expected, comes just hours after the Treasury announced a £50 billion bailout of the banking system. Similar reductions have been announced at the same time in the United States and Europe. The Labour MP for Gorton, Gerald Kaufman, stressed the need for politicians to offer practical support.
Will my Prime Minister, my right honourable friend the Prime Minister, assert that the jobs, homes, small businesses, savings and pensions of those fellow citizens of ours are the profound top concern of this government?
The Chancellor, Alistair Darling, said that the aim was to help depositors through the crisis.
The purpose of these proposals is to get lending started again and the economy moving forward. It is one of a number of measures that we are taking to deal with specific cases as well as providing general support. And we are ready to do more whenever it is necessary. Failure to act would have meant far greater risks to the economy and to the public finances in the future.
A pub in North Manchester has been forced to close after the landlord failed to deal with fighting, drug-taking and other antisocial behaviour. The Moston on Hillier Street North in Harper Hay had its licence taken away after police and local people reported a rise in crime in recent months. The landlord, David Chohan, was accused of failing to stop the problems and a lack of concern for his neighbours. Schools are being sent guidance from the government on how to prevent pupils from being drawn into terrorism and extremism. Teachers will be asked to find ways to discuss the issues with children as young as 5, and they'll be expected to report any pupils who they suspect may be influenced by extremists. The Deputy General Secretary of the Association of Teachers and Lecturers, Martin Johnson, welcomed the approach.
Schools above all and educators above any other section of society believe in the force of reason rather than the use of force. And this toolkit just brings together a lot of good advice about the many things that schools are doing and can do better in terms of putting that message over to their youngsters.
More than 100 MPs are trying to change the law in England and Wales to ban smacking children, but the government is opposed to the idea. In Scotland, smacking children under the age of 3 is already against the law. If you know someone who's made a big difference to sport in your community, maybe someone who's coached your kids or helped at your local gym, then we want to hear from you. The BBC Sports Personality of the Year Awards are coming up next month, and there's a chance to honour the unsung heroes of local sport. Bolton's Olympic medal winner Jason Kenny is nominating Graham Leake from the Manchester Velodrome for the award.
He just provided cover for the track and just showed you how to ride your bike properly, like the basics. It's just like the place where everyone starts in the sport, I guess. But then as soon as you get any good, you kind of leave it behind and you move on to a bigger and better club with the professional coach and everything, and people like Graham get left behind. So something like this is really good to kind of recognise the really important people in sport, I guess.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
The International Olympic Committee has revealed it will retest 5,000 doping samples from the Beijing Games to check for traces of a new blood booster drug. The IOC says its doping lab in Switzerland would be specifically testing for SERA, an advanced version of endurance-enhancing hormone EPO. Oldham striker Lee Hughes has told BBC Radio Manchester that he believes the club have a great chance of gaining promotion to the Championship. The Latics are currently third in League One. West Ham say they won't be able to buy any new players in the January transfer window unless they sell. The club also insist it's not for sale, despite the chairman being hit financially by the collapse of the Landsbanki in Iceland. And Steve Ganson and Ashley Klein will be England's representatives on the referees panel for the World Cup. The full-time officials were in charge of all the Super League playoff matches between them this season.
BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, the first thing I should say is there is a small chance of a shower as you go through the day, but most places should stay dry. It's dry and bright as we speak. There are some pretty decent spells of sunshine forecast. Every now and then the cloud cover will roll back on in, but it won't spoil the day. Wherever you are, it should be bright. The wind's much lighter than yesterday, and your top temperature, it's a pleasant 15 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Malcolm in Offerton says, if we had an ID card system, taking the event of the number plate recognition system linked with the insurance database system balls up that you mentioned earlier, how many people will get chucked in nick due to an administrative error? Or even worse, I've seen those tasers used on the telly and it doesn't look nice. That's Malcolm in Offerton suggesting that you may get tasered because of some information wrongly held on your ID card. Hey, you can laugh, but it could so very easily happen, could it not? And Gordon says, I've said time and time again that there was more than meets the eye with Northern Rock. It was on the cards and the government did jack all about it. When do I get my share certificates through? Yes, given that we now own it, one would hope that we're all going to get half a share in it, don't we? Dear me. And Pete says, I don't mind having an identity card. I'll have bugger all else to put in my wallet, apart from my donor card, the way it's going. Fabulous. Graham in Crewe. Hiya, Graham.
Hiya, mate. You all right?
I'm not bad.
Good. Just getting back to a point you made earlier about the car insurance, couple on the motorway.
Yes.
When you made a suggestion that we all should carry our insurance documents with us.
Well, it's the only way to avoid that which happened to them.
Yeah, even though they've used the ANPR, which is the automatic number plate recognition system, the actual document, piece of paper, doesn't prove that you've got insurance, and they'd still book you and take you away.
Would they? Even if you said, well, look, I've got it here, look, have a look at it.
Yeah, the only way...
Because I suppose you could cancel it, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could have it on like a direct debit, monthly direct debit thing, and once you get your certificate through, cancel it. But that's where the ANPR picks up because it's linked to the database. So they'd know that. The only other way, if you did have your document on, they could actually ring the insurance company themselves to double check that you've got insurance. But
well, I suppose in that way you'd have the number, but again, the copper's not going to do that, is he?
No.
They're just going to say, well, you don't look insured to me, pal. Walk this way.
Yeah. And getting back to the ID cards.
Yes.
There was an idea I come up with a while ago when similar thing when you said if they muck up some colour card on the computers, mucked up your details.
Yeah.
There is we do have cards now that do prove our identity slightly, but not in the same way. It's your chip and pin, like your bank card.
Yeah.
Using the same sort of system, chip and pin kind of thing, where you've got a machine. Most shops have them anyway now. All you've got to do is just change the software, and then you could put your ID card in with a chip and pin chip on it.
Well, that sounds like an immensely sensible idea, which is damaged only by that since chip and pin came in, there has been more fraud, not less.
Right, I didn't know the figures.
I don't know the figures. I just remember reading that in the newspaper about a week ago, but there's been more fraud since chip and pin came in than there was before. Now, it's not the same kind of fraud, but it still means there's some bugger having money away out your bank.
Yeah.
I've had my credit card stolen twice since chip and... That's a coincidence, but since chip and pin came in. Now, it hasn't cost me a penny, not cost me 1 red cent, but I suspect it's costing the credit card money. Just small amounts. The last time was just recently when we were in France and my cards were stolen. And for a month afterwards, there was a small amount of a couple of francs here and a couple of francs there, or a couple of euros, sorry, here and there, coming through on my account. And I eventually got in touch with the bank and said, look, these aren't mine, this is the stolen card. And it was the swine going up and down the motorway. You know how you have to pay on the motorways, and it was a swine doing that. And of course, they're not checked. They're not going to have a whole checking system to check that simply because it's only €2. But he's probably still using it, the git.
I mean, there is measures we can take as individuals to safeguard our own property and personal protection with regards to the credit card. And I mean, a lot of people go on the computer and order stuff over the internet using credit cards and personal data, whereas I wouldn't. I think it's totally ludicrous because I mean, they always say it's safeguarded. But, I mean, you don't know what is safeguarded nowadays.
Well, nothing, including the Bank of England, is 100% safe. How could it be? But we have to transact in the modern way, don't we? I mean...
Oh, yeah. And you still have to take precautions then, obviously.
Yes, but the only reasonable precautions... I mean, if you use a legitimate site and somehow your computer is hacked into and you take the money off you, as it were, you get stolen from, then your credit card company stands that risk rather than you. Providing you've taken all the normal, nothing extraordinary, but all the normal precautions.
Yeah.
You know, so in the end, what do I care?
So, well, at least we've cleared up the fact that even if you've got your insurance policy with you...
It's not going to do you any good, so don't bother then.
No, don't
Thank
bother.
you, Graham. Have a good day,
All right.
mate. We've been corrected. I've forgotten what we said, actually, but we were talking about the Leeson character that brought down Barings Bank, wasn't it? His name is Nick, according to Wendy. Wendy, thank you for that. Nick. We were calling him something else. Perhaps we were calling him Mick. I've no idea. Or something entirely different. But whatever it was, that's not his name. It is Nick. And I do sort of remember. Terry and Tilsley. Teachers at Whitegate End Primary in Chadderton Oldham went on a 3-day weekend trip to Barcelona for teacher training. Yet again, people are saying why these teachers can't do their training during the 13 weeks holiday. Well, I'll tell you something, Alan. I won't go into work during my holidays for training, and I suspect that most of the people moaning about this trip in the MEN wouldn't either. Hear, hear, sir. Neither would I. Doesn't explain why they had to go to Barcelona, though. I'm not sure what there is in Barcelona that will make you a better teacher, unless it's 15 pints of cheap wine. I can't work out what there is in Barcelona that you can't get in Chadderton. Now, with no disrespect to Chadderton, I do appreciate that Barcelona has Gaudi and all sorts of other attractions that Chadderton doesn't have. But they're not going for the Gaudi, nor the wine, nor even the prawn supper. They're not even going for the wonderful market halfway up the Rambles. They're going to be taught how to teach. Frankly, they look to me, and I do know they have the support of parents, but they look to me, they're being taught how to get a freebie. I've nothing wrong. I have no comment to make about people getting freebies for reasons which may become obvious later. But let's not pretend they're going there to teach. They're going on a bloody jolly.
Your Sunday Morning Lion with Mike Shaft.
Do you expect a larger number of church weddings because of this?
I really hope there will be. In the church, it's one of the great things that we enjoy doing is celebrating the big milestones with people. And a wedding is a great occasion to celebrate with people.
Give me a little bit of an idea about the Salvation Army.
One of the happy descriptions of the Salvation Army over the years has been heart to God and hand to man, or Christianity with its sleeves rolled up.
Manchester's faith, spirit, and life's difficult questions with Mike Shaft.
Can I ask why not?
Sunday morning from 7 on BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. 0161 228 2255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And, of course, you can text on 07786 206 951. Pete says, did I hear you say that banks lent their money out with interest and still managed to make a loss? What the devil have they been doing with all the money that's been sat in my business account, then? Isn't it all our money? And who's going to take the can? Well, it is all our money in the end, but we put it on deposit with the bank, and they, if we have it on deposit with the bank, give us an interest return for that. They pay us for that privilege. You don't think they just sit there counting it. They then lend it out. Now, it's not our money because it's become theirs when we lent it to them, and all we can demand is they give it back to us, of course. But they then lend it out to somebody else. as their own money, and they charge them more than they give to us, and the profit is contained in the difference between the two. But if the person who they lent it to doesn't pay them, then they're stuffed, which is the technical term for it. Peter in Hyde, hiya.
Oh, I was a taxi driver myself for 30 years.
Oh,
right?
yeah?
Yeah, well, I was on your programme one time. It was Father Christmas. Do you remember it?
Oh, good Lord.
I
do. I've not got over it yet. You were quite scary. Anyway, go on.
Right, this excellence RB session, what I call it, for these taxi drivers.
Yeah.
I was a driver for 30 years in Manchester, right? After a certain time, when the water holes have let out, I'll put it that way to you.
When the what?
When the water holes let out, the pubs.
Oh, yes, the watering holes, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, some of these people what stand on these ranks and you front down, a skip won't be good enough to take them home. Now, this is true. Now, I've had people spew up in my cab, one to another, fighting, put the feet on the seats, and I have said to him, excuse me, have you had your breakfast yet? Well, put your feet on the floor. Now, years ago, Alan, I don't know if you remember, there used to be a model called the FX3 with the cab was single away from the vehicle. The driver was contained most to himself. Do you ever remember that type? The old London FX3?
Yes, I do, with the sort of luggage instead of...
Correct, that's what I'm getting to.
Go on.
Now, it's not the drivers when they say open the door to put luggage in. I think you'll find out, I could be wrong, your boot is not for carrying luggage. Your boot is for the driver's personal spare wheel, jack and oil. Right, now if you put your suitcase in the boot, gets full of oil, you can claim off the driver or try and claim, whichever the case may be. Now, it's not the drivers, it's the designers in the council what's let them get away by putting 4 doors on the cab. Now, the law still states there should be a place for a bearer of A, and that's where the word comes from. Hansom cab or hackney cab was to carry a bearer of A in the side for a horse.
That is what it was for. We might have moved on a little since
Yes, I can understand that, Alan. But what I'm trying to say, why did they shape the design of the cab where there's nowhere to put the luggage on? The councils are to blame, and the designers.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean now, Alan?
Well, I do, but I think the answer to your question is that most journeys in a taxi don't involve luggage.
Well, a lot of them do from the airport, and people
but those still, whilst they still do,
yes,
there are quite a lot of them. Most journeys, if you get a taxi in Manchester,
it's A to B, isn't it?
It's A to B.
Yes,
most journeys in a taxi don't involve luggage.
No.
So they've designed taxis that don't bother carrying them. And if you're coming from the airport, then I always get a taxi from the airport when I'm here. If I've been on holiday, I've got my luggage with me. It fits in the cab with me.
But that is correct. That is the way to do it. Yeah. That is correct. I agree.
No problem.
Now, they're saying that they've got to have a test, £200 to open the doors and put the luggage, put the shopping in. Does a bus driver do that?
No, he doesn't.
Does the British Railway do that?
No, they don't.
So why pick on poor taxi drivers trying to earn a few shillings to keep a roof over their head?
Because quite a lot of them are lazy gets.
Well, I quite agree. I couldn't
and quite a lot of them won't get off their arse and knock on the door.
Alan, I quite agree with you.
So, obviously, they need to be trained, and if it costs them £200, well, hard luck. They should have got off their arse for years.
Yeah, I quite agree.
Quite a lot of them are surly gets who, frankly, you wouldn't want to engage in conversation. Some of them can't even be bothered to get off the bloody mobile phone whilst they do it. So, they need a course. They don't need a course. What they need is thumb screws.
Well, some of them do.
Indeed so. Now, what the problem here is that the authorities can't go round and say, you're one of the grumpy gets, go on a course.
No, it's true.
What they say is the only way we can weed out the grumpy gets is everybody goes on the course.
That is correct.
And the taxi drivers have only themselves to blame. The minority...
I couldn't agree with you.
Well, that's all right, and we agree. The minority have screwed it for the majority.
Correct.
A bit like the banks.
Oh, don't run about them, please.
Good on you, Peter.
Don't get on that. I'm sweating now. Please.
Are you really? Never mind. You sweat for the bank. You should see the look on your face when the taxman comes.
Oh, I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about what I've got inside the bank.
I bet you're worried about him for 30 years when you were on the rank. Have a good day, mate.
Okay, Alan, thanks very much.
0161 228 2255. You got something to say? That is absolutely fine. Just pick up your phone and get on with it. We don't mind at all. A story again, I said that the cops are getting a kick-in today. Well, they're getting another kick-in. This is a rather more specific one. Yeah, in fact, there's not time before the headlines, so I'll tell you that after. But they're getting a kick-in from a more private source than just the simple newspapers. And Andy in Runcorn harps back to yesterday. His email came after we'd finished yesterday, and he says, I have 2 kids, and I can't begin to imagine what it's like to lose them to a plonker like that idiot footballer from Plymouth. I was kind of shocked at my own reaction when I saw him, because he looked like a kid himself, not much older than my lad of 16, I thought. I did a lot of stupid things, says Andy, when I was young, and now I'm an old fogey. I tend to judge young people a lot more leniently. This young man must be punished, but let's not pretend he's the only one out of all of us who could have been guilty of a pile-up through bad driving. Come to think of it, Andy, or even through drunk driving. He's not the only one. People hark about it as if it's the crime of the century. I wonder how many of those screaming out for his blood had a glass of wine on the way home from work yesterday. OK, they weren't over the limit. They're still drink driving, thus stupid. 1:20 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines. Rachel Ferguson.
Interest rates have been cut by 0.5%. The snap decisions come a day earlier than expected and just hours after a £50 billion bailout of the banking system. A pub in North Manchester has been forced to close after the landlord failed to deal with fighting, drug taking and other antisocial behaviour. The Moston on Hillier Street North in Harper Hayes had its licence taken away after police reported a rise in crime in recent months. And if you know someone who's made a big difference to sport in your community, perhaps someone who's coached your children, then you can nominate them for a BBC Sports Award. You've got till the end of the month to log on to the BBC's website and nominate them for an Unsung Heroes Award as part of the BBC's Sports Personality of the Year Awards. Manchester's weather this afternoon, some isolated showers, but mostly dry with sunny spells, highs of 15 degrees.
I think I'll nominate that bloke with all the tattoos that sells the steroids at the local gym. He's done his bit.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
If you're travelling through the Lately Common area, the East Lancs Road on the A580 looking quite busy in both directions around Warrington Road. It's roadworks along that stretch causing traffic to slow right down. And in the centre of Manchester, problems on Market Street. It's partially blocked off around Cross Street and Corporation Street. The buses are unable to pass at the moment because of a car that's collided with an automatic bollard. So please make sure you allow yourself plenty of extra journey time if you use the buses. Don't forget, though, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Is that another one of them bollards at Market Street?
I think it is.
Fantastic. I think they should have them dead powerful so that when a car goes out and it hits it, it turns it upside down, does a somersault. That'll do. How stupid are they? Thank you, ma'am.
2020 traffic means you get an update every 20 minutes through the day.
It says, don't go down here, but I'll sneak in behind the bus. That'll be clever. Bang! Hey, look what's happened to me car! Cretin.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Douglas in Ratcliffe. Hiya, Douglas.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm all right, mate.
Right, you were talking about the people getting the cars nicked for no insurance and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And said that Bobby wouldn't ring the insurance company. I work for an insurance company, and I can assure you that Bobbies do.
Do they? The coppers actually ring up?
Yeah, we have people who work in the company I work for, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but they've got a very tall building.
Well, you either are going to tell me or you're not. I think you just did, but go on for a moment.
But we have people that if the police ring in, they put through to them, so that if it does go to court, those people can then either fight the case for us or be in court and say, look, they weren't insured.
But the situation I was after, I feel sure that the police will make that inquiry if they arrest somebody for a motoring offence and the like. They will make that inquiry as a matter of course. I understand that. The scenario that we were discussing was the copper's driving along and for whatever reason he keys in the registration number of the vehicle in front of him and discovers that it's not on computer as being insured.
Yeah.
Now, this is because there's a story of this kind in the evening news today. Copper pulls the family over, say, you're not insured. He says, yes, I am. And they say, well, I've just done the computer, you're not. So get out your car and get off the motorway. And they stopped the traffic, but they made them walk off the motorway. Yeah. Turns out they were insured, but unfortunately, the electronic system hadn't operated properly, either because of some clown pushing the buttons or because of the dots and dashes of the binary code. But that was it. And I then said, well, perhaps the answer is to carry your insurance certificate. Somebody else came on and said, waste of time, because they won't rely on that. Because you could have insurance, then cancel it, keep the certificate, and it looks like you're insured, but the computer says you're not. Now, that's where we said, would a copper, because on this occasion clearly he didn't, would a copper ring the insurance company you claim to be insured with and check? And I think at the side of the road, the answer's no.
Again, I would say that the policeman needs to use a bit of common sense in that respect, in that if they're on the motorway, you could pull them off the motorway, leave them in the car and escort them off and say, right, you're not insured, off you go, once they've checked.
But on that occasion, now it may be unique, but on that occasion, the officer, and all coppers these days have a mobile phone, and if they don't, they've got radio contact with the NIC, and the NIC has a phone in it. Yeah. If the man said, well, I'm insured with an anonymous firm that has a dirty great big building in Manchester, used to be the highest building in Manchester, will you ring them? Well, of course, I don't think the copper would, for a variety of reasons. One, he can't be asked. Two, he doesn't know the number. He can find the insurance number, but he doesn't know the man's insurance policy. He can find the phone number, he doesn't know his policy number, so it wouldn't be easy. So he says, no, you're not there.
When it happens with our end, we will talk to the customer, make sure that the customer is actually someone who we are insuring, and then ask them, do they mind if we speak to the policeman? Because data protection.
Well, yes, but the copper's not going to stand there and wait for that to happen.
Not on a motorway, no, but it does happen on the side of the road. You'd be surprised at how many times it does happen, yeah.
Oh, well, I do hope so. I do hope so.
And I think it'd be an intransigent policeman who would just say, get out and off you go. Because,
that's apparently what happened here.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are intransigent so-and-sos in the world wherever we go.
Indeed, I believe there are broadcasters of that kind, but I can't think of one at present.
I would never claim to know any. But I also lie.
Have a good day, mate. Thank you for that. Douglas
Bye-bye.
in Ratcliffe says the coppers do sometimes phone up, but clearly when they're on the motorway, possibly not because of the inherent danger of that situation. Well, OK, it's not a bad defence. Neil in Bebington says taxi drivers do need testing, a DNA test to see if they're human or not. That's Neil in Bebington. It's not me. Don't be bunging it on my meter. Alan says, Mike in Bagley, it was Nick Leeson who broke Baring's bank. So says Mike in Bagley, as I said. Well, that's fair enough. We've been told that. We ignore stuff like that. We'll carry on making the mistakes if they're more interesting. Yes. I think we've done this one before, but you could go to www.askmid, ASKMID.co.uk, which is the motor insurers database, and you can check if your insurance details are on the base. It also has a link to the DVLA about road tax as well. So what you do, we have done it before, Malcolm, you're right. I actually did mine and learned that it wasn't insured, but that's because I'd put the number in the wrong way round. Not for the first time. Anyway, the operator error once again. But yes, you can go into that. AskMID, ASKMID. It asks you if you are the owner of the vehicle. Well, just lie, if you need to. And type in the registration number of the vehicle, and the askmid.co.uk will tell you whether insurance and other stuff. It won't tell you the name of it or even the name of the owner or anything like that, but it will tell you whether that particular vehicle is insured. Dead easy. I don't know what to say about this. Jeff sent me an email that says, we thought our lot were crap. Listen, read this press release to line 4 and 5. This is apparently from Lincolnshire Police. Well, here we go. William Pleasance sadly passed away this morning. His family were with him. His death follows a night out at the in Lincoln, where police believed he may have been involved in an altercation inside the club before being restrained by door staff outside the club. The cause of death is unknown at this stage. A Home Office pathologist carried out a post-mortem yesterday afternoon. Police are continuing to appeal for witnesses to the altercation inside the club and the incident outside the club where William Pleasance was restrained by door staff. Police are keen to trace a man believed to be involved in the altercation inside, who's described as 6 foot, approximately 20 years of age, and a large build. The man was wearing a short-sleeved dark-coloured top and had jelly, spiky, short hair. Police would also... Well, I've read to line 4 and 5. And frankly, can't see much wrong with it. You'll have to explain. It may simply be that I'm so used to reading the somewhat garrulous and not particularly explanatory press releases from police incidents. But, well, what does one say? That's all I've got. So it might be that. I'm just immune to the stuff. But thank you nonetheless. And why you're au fait with all that goes on in Lincolnshire Police? Well, frankly, it's probably best that I don't know. Chris says, here in sunny 28 degrees Sevilla, it's the law to carry all your documents with you if you're in your car. Insurance, certificate of ownership, etc. It's also mandatory to carry your ID card at all times. So says Chris, who's emigrated from these shores and gone to live in a fascist state. But at least a warm one. Bitter? Me? I don't know what you mean. Chris, if you see any British teachers whilst you're out there, they're on courses and the like, could you ask them what the hell they're doing and what they can learn in Spain that they couldn't have learned in Britain? Just while you're there, we wouldn't engage you to do that job, but come on. You can ask them that. Somebody must know. I'm begging if I do. And somebody else living in Spain does seem to be the fashion, doesn't it? This is Brian. He says, Alan, I live in Spain, and when I applied for a credit card from my Spanish bank, I was readily issued with one. However, the money owing on it is taken out of my current account at the beginning of each month to settle the credit card bill. No money owed can be carried over to the next month. That was the condition on which the card was issued. The benefit being that I can't get into medium or long-term debt by using the card. Individuals borrowing debt here is a fraction of that in the UK. I also heard recently that in France, a mortgage advance requires a lender to find 50% of the amount to be borrowed. Although you may know more about this than me, he says. But they are lessons to be learned, are they not? Well, yeah, they are. The American Express card, there's now an American Express credit card, but there used to be an American Express charge card, as indeed there is diners. And the rules there are that you can spend a substantial amount of money on them at any given moment, but the rules are that you have to pay it off at the end of the month, so you don't run up a huge debt. Now, if you do spend a lot of money on your charge card and then don't pay it off, A, you're in breach of the rules and contract. So what they do then is they hammer you. They absolutely hammer you for interest. And why not? You're breaking the rules. You're breaking your contract. You're trying to take money from them to which you are not entitled. So that's fine. Ricky in Preston says, just listening to one of your callers discussing Bush and the like, and he used an objectionable word, coloured. For an English person to use such a word is insulting, to say the least. After all, an Englishman would not go to a car sales room and ask the salesperson and tell the salesperson he wanted to buy a coloured car, would he? He'd be specific and denote the precise colour he wanted. So why do English people perennially show such a lack of use of the English language, insultingly tarnishing all non-white as coloured, like in coloured water? Why can't there be specifics such as the American blacks or the Hispanics or what have you? Well, the trouble is, there isn't a word that I'm aware of that encapsulates all the non-Indigenous population people. And what the term coloured was perfectly acceptable, and indeed was considerably more acceptable than the alternatives back in the 60s, 70s and early 80s, where you got other words. And people started to use the word coloured because it was considered to be not offensive. But as is the way with these things, fashion takes over, and it became fashionable to say coloured is offensive. Personally, I don't think it is, although I do accept that it's not an acceptable term. In America, they started to use the collective term for those others you mentioned, American blacks and American Orientals and Hispanics and all the rest of it. They began to use the term people of colour. I've even heard Barack Obama use the term people of colour, because it is a way forward. But I think that is just simply clumsy, a clumsy way of saying exactly the same thing. People of colour instead of coloured people. You wouldn't say a car of red, to continue your example. You wouldn't go into the garage and say, can I have a car of red? You would say, can I have a red car? And no one would take offence at that. Well, no one other than people who know that red cars are actually quite scary things. So I despair of this whole prickliness around words, although do accept, and indeed we have certain policies here that are, I think, designed and generally do prevent people from being hurt by description. I mean, we wouldn't describe the skin colour of an individual that the police were looking for unless it was relevant. Now, if the police are looking for him, the colour of their skin might well be relevant, but we wouldn't. For example, let us say a person of colour broke into a bank and ran away, and we are just reporting the fact that the bank was broken into. We wouldn't state that the person was of colour unless it was relevant. That's when it becomes, and then we'd try to be specific, like Afro-Caribbean or whatever the terms are. But frankly, apart from the fact that it does agitate people and even hurt people, which is not something you ought to do lightly, apart from that fact, I can't see what's wrong with, oh, he was coloured, meaning he wasn't white. None of us are. But you know what I mean. And you know what the term means. And frankly, not everybody that uses that term uses it in offence. And the gentleman that was talking earlier wasn't using it in any way offensively. And I made the decision to ignore what he'd said. I would normally pull people up for phrases like that or terms like that, but on this occasion, let it ride, because he wasn't using it in any other way than an adjective to distinguish. Now, the problem there is, if you're using adjectives to distinguish, are you not inevitably being, well, ist in some way? Ian in Northwich, 20 years ago today, I went to London for the massive Jean-Michel Jarre Docklands open-air concert that was the biggest ever. The weather was appalling, gale force. It was initially cancelled for safety reasons, but allowed to go on after last-minute talks. Did anyone else go? Well, Ian, you know somebody else went. The place was crowded. Exactly. If you mean, did anyone else who's listening right now to this programme go? One rather hopes not. We kind of feel that the people listening to this ought to have some taste. Anyway, and didn't he do Salford? Why did he go all that way, you clown? He came here and did Salford, didn't he? I mean, he didn't know it was Salford. He thought it was Manchester, but come on, he's French. And I think he did Salford. Yeah. Did you hear Oasis this morning? Well, a lump of them. I don't know which one of the Gallaghers, but you hear one of the former housebreakers earlier saying that they're going to do a huge, spectacular concert in Manchester next year. And you wouldn't guess where, in 100 guesses, he said. Well, did he say 500? Oh, 500 then. He probably thinks that's the same as 100. Anyway, he said there'll be 500 guesses and you won't guess where. So, what I want you to do is to email me, don't phone, email me 500 places in Manchester, as he likes to pronounce it, 500 places in Manchester where Oasis could do a concert. 500 places in Manchester where they could do a concert. You could spend all day and name 12 million places in Manchester they could do a concert that I wouldn't attend, but that's entirely different. If Oasis were playing in the garden, I'd ask them to turn it down a bit and move next door. But no, 500 places, he said. We're going to do a concert. It's going to be huge. We're going to do a huge concert in Manchester. And you wouldn't guess where in 500 guesses. So, Eaton Park. We could be here a while. Eaton Park. GMX. The Arena. The 2 football grounds. Half a dozen other parks. Albert Square. I've only got 470 to go. It's 20 to 2 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines, Rachel Ferguson.
Interest rates have been cut by 0.5%. The decision's come a day earlier than expected and just hours after a £50 billion bailout of the banking system. A pub in North Manchester has had to close after the landlord failed to deal with fighting, drug-taking and other antisocial behaviour. The Moston on Hillier Street North in Harper Hayes had its licence taken away after a reported rise in crime in recent months. And if you know someone who's made a big difference to sport in your community, perhaps someone who's coached your children, you've got until the end of the month to nominate them for a BBC Sports Award. You can log on to the BBC's website and nominate them in the Unsung Heroes category of the BBC's Sports Personality of the Year Awards. Manchester's weather this afternoon, some isolated showers, mostly dry though with sunny spells, highs of 15 degrees.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, let's take a quick peek firstly to traffic cameras on the M6, and all seems to be moving along fairly freely between junction 18 at Middlewich through as far as junction 27 at Standish north and southbound. We're still seeing slight delays on the East Lancs on the A580 around Warrington Road in the roadworks area, and Market Street still partially blocked off because of an accident around Cross Street and Corporation Street after a car collided with one of the automatic bollards. So buses at the moment, I'm afraid, are unable to pass. Don't forget though, if you can update me further, call in. The number's 01612 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Joanne Smith.
Good afternoon. Clubs with excessive debt could face being thrown out of the Champions League and UEFA Cup. That's according to UEFA's General Secretary David Taylor. A working party will hold its first meeting at the headquarters of European football's governing body on Monday to come up with fresh ways to put the squeeze on clubs who are succeeding on borrowed money. Well, Taylor suggested that theoretically, even Europe's biggest clubs like Chelsea and Manchester United, both heavily in debt, could be thrown out. Well, an FA board member has moved to allay fears that the Premier League is facing financial crisis. Yesterday, the FA chairman Lord Treesman warned that a combined debt, estimated at £3 billion, was a tangible danger to English clubs. However, the Ipswich chairman, David Sheepshanks, says there's no problem with clubs having debts if they can manage them.
Football is not immune to the problems going on globally, but I think we need to get a proportionate response. There's a frightening number that's been mentioned by Lord Treesman yesterday in terms of the aggregate debt of Premier League clubs, but there's equally a huge amount of income, and the important thing about debt is whether you can service the debt.
The International Olympic Committee says it intends to retest doping samples from the Beijing Games. It wants to check for traces of a new blood-boosting drug called Sera. With the details, here's our Olympics correspondent, Gordon Farker.
What they're looking at here is a new test for third-generation EPO. It's a blood-boosting drug. It allows more oxygen to be carried in the system. It aids stamina. And it's that they believe that they've got a strong test for. At the moment, cyclists from this year's Tour de France are having their samples retested. Already, the French testing laboratory has found 2 more cyclists who are cheating using this new substance that's called Sera. And now the IOC is going to do the same, and they're going to talk to WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, to create a protocol for this, which basically means, to have a legal format for them doing the retesting, but they say it will be a substantial number of samples across all sports, not just cycling.
Oldham striker Lee Hughes has told BBC Radio Manchester about his ambitions to return to a high level of football and thinks he can achieve that at Boundary Park. Hughes is now in his 2nd season with Oldham, but already knows about playing in the top 2 divisions from his time with Coventry and West Brom.
I want to play in the Championship. Hopefully, with Oldham. I think everyone's ambitious at the club, especially if we keep the older the experienced players fit. Definitely, I think we've got a great chance, especially with the younger players last year. They've had a lot of experience playing, they've played a lot of games, so with their experience now, that we'll have a good chance.
Bury manager Alan Neil believes Andy Bishop is beginning to reproduce some of last season's form that resulted in interest from scouts. After scoring twice on Saturday, Bishop scored the only goal in last night's Johnstone's Paint Trophy victory over Stockport.
He's fantastic. I have to say that the last 2 games, he looks probably back to his best. And probably he'd say the same, that before that, he hasn't felt physically as good as he could possibly be, but on Saturday and tonight, he looks a handful.
Meanwhile, Bolton reserves take on Manchester United's 2nd string tonight. England coach Tony Smith has told BBC Radio Manchester he came very close to selecting Wigan's Stuart Fielden and Salford's Richard Myler in his 24-man World Cup squad. Fielden's omission had surprised many.
Very close. Stuart in particular, not so much Richard for the World Cup. I think he may represent his country in the near future, but I think it's a little premature for Richard to go in the World Cup. It's going to be a different test for a young man of his age and experience.
Steve Ganson and Ashley Klein will be England's representatives on the referees panel for the World Cup. The full-time officials were in charge of all the Super League playoff matches between them this season. Oldham have signed Thomas Coyle from Wigan Warriors on a 1-year deal. He'll team up with his elder brother James, who has signed a contract extension to stay with the Ruffiads next season.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
It comes on Friday night as we bring you full match commentary on England against Wales in the Rugby League International, plus coverage of Rochdale against Lincoln.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. How are you? Excellent. Dave says in Salford, the lift in Beetham Tower should have plenty of room for Oasis and their fans. That's not fair. I mean, whether you like them or not is immaterial. They've got lots of fans. They're selling out all over the show. I even heard somebody this morning, I didn't pay much attention to it, but I heard somebody this morning saying that she went to the Oasis concert last night. It was somebody in this building, so obviously they didn't pay, but they went. Okay. I lost interest at that point. You're talking to me anyway, but that doesn't usually stop me expressing an interest. Well, if it's Middle Eastlands, it'll be the first time he's been to a home game for a long while. And how come proud Mancunians like Noel Gallagher never step foot in the place? Oh, well, every cloud, Alan. Oh, he does. He comes home. He even goes to games. Perhaps he's not been for a while, but they've been busy trying to learn another chord. But he did exclude. So it's 501 if you include, but it was the 500 venues that we'd never guess. He started by saying, and it's not Eastlands, City of Manchester Stadium, he said. He obviously knows the name of it. So I don't know. David says, Alan, is it just my suspicious mind, or has anybody else noticed that the council have dug up the roads and tram lines, causing traffic chaos at rush hour a few weeks before the congestion vote? I wouldn't like to say. You often have the answer to things, so maybe you know this. What is the reason that we don't have something to display for insurance in the same way we do for tax? I assume there is a reason, because if not, it would suggest that our legislators are even more hopeless than we thought if they've ignored such an obvious remedy. Lee in Liverpool. Other nations do have such a thing. I think Switzerland, where a gentleman is on his way there from somewhere near Oldham. He was talking to Heather earlier. Anyway, it doesn't matter. In Switzerland, I think they do. I could be wrong. Please don't correct me. I don't really care. It's only the Swiss. There's only 12 of them, and they only make clocks and cheese. Who cares? Oh, and chocolate. Toblerone. It gets stuck in your teeth. It's horrible. Anyway, yeah. Where was I? Oh, yeah. The reason they don't is because if you put the tax disc up, that's fine, because it is the car that is taxed. But with insurance, it's the driver in that car that is insured, but that driver is entitled to drive another vehicle, which he doesn't own, hasn't hired, and, frankly, will not get the same level of insurance. So the insurance is transferable from car to car, so that's possibly why. So that's your question answered. No, that's it. Burnage Lane Park, where they used to live. They could go there. They could play there, couldn't they? I don't know whether it'd be big enough. I don't know Burnage Lane Park. I don't frequent the parks. Well, I'm a male on my own. You'd end up in jail. And Chris is back on. It's not fascist here in Spain, he says. Not anymore. That Franco bloke died, you know. Also, it's far safer to walk the streets here than in England. I'm an English teacher, he says, in that I teach English. Well, that's kind of you to explain, and I'm sure on your courses you do go to the trouble of getting your pupils to learn to express themselves fully. But frankly, when you said I'm an English teacher, I took it as read that you were English, having previously referred to your experience of life in England. So, when you said I'm an English teacher in that I teach English, you could have saved yourselves a lot of trouble by leaving the nationhood as unimplied, or you could have said, I am a teacher of English. Far be it for me to teach you English, but hey, you're only teaching the Spanish. They set their standards for English a lot lower than mine. The people you were talking about, I believe, are in Barcelona, some 426 miles from Sevilla, so the chances of me seeing them are rather slim. Well, yes, had I been specifically inviting you to look out for the teachers that were referred to earlier in the programme, you are without doubt correct, sir. But I didn't. I said if you see any teachers. I didn't say if you see them teachers from here. So again, your English is letting you down, pal. You've been away far too long. Chris says, say hello to me mum. Hello, Aisler. I'm not doing that again. 0161 228 2255. Why aren't you teaching English anyway at 10 to 2 in the day, for crying out loud? We never thought you'd guess. It's in your garden, Liam and Noel. Oh, very good. Thank you for that. Yes. That would be funny. Eh? Oh, aye, they're going to do it. That's it. They're going to play in this studio between 12 and 2 on a weekday. Well, that's all right. We get a day off, as long as I get paid. I don't mind a day off, as long as they pay me.
Caffeinated conversation with Heather Stott and friends.
What was it like being part of this very professional machine that is TV?
Oh, man, it's not easy. Waiting in the cold around for hours on end.
I'm sorry, but I'm not buying that. Because you pretend for a living, that's what you do. Don't tell me that dressing up and be on the telly is hard work. Do you find that the four of you are honest? Yeah, I think so. Are you? Yeah. Why are you laughing, Graham?
When you said about being honest, this is an estate agent.
No, I don't lie. I'm just very economical with the truth. That's me.
Heather Stott.
Do you like that?
Tomorrow morning from 9 on BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day. Well, I've started something now that I could have done without. I said that the Swiss only make cheese with holes in, cuckoo clocks and Toblerone. Well, Gordon adds to the list. I think probably exhausts it in so doing, but no matter. Dentures. Apparently, according to Gordon, I'm not one to question, as you know. According to Gordon, the Swiss make dentures. They are the largest producers of dentures in the world. So what, when you have to bite into that cack, I'm sure that's not the technical name for it, but I've had to do it for a crown. No, I'm not royalty. I've had to do it for a crown. And you bite into cack, and then they sort of prize it off, and they send it somewhere, and a fortnight later you have to go back to have a shiny white thing glued on the little stump what they made. That's it, that's all I got. So, does that go off to Switzerland then? Does it? Good Lord, how fascinating. Yeah. So is that what Mark Thatcher's doing now? Is he head of translating cack into teeth? Oh, I do hope so. Oh, that would lift me day. Ace says, Alan, the ID card is only as good as the data held on computers, the same computers that said this guy wasn't insured. I'm glad that we're clamping down on uninsured drivers. They cause so much heartache for people. I think we should have stop checks as well. It's time to have roadside checks for drivers who don't use indicators. No, you don't need... Drivers who don't use indicators should be taken out by snipers. Shouldn't they? Why not? Can't see any reason for it. I've asked this before. Absolutely. I have asked this many, many times before. At what point does the driver, who's been taught to use indicators like there's no tomorrow, suddenly decide, I'm not going to bother anymore? Never understood that. And why is it that some drivers forget? I mean, it's not just they forget, it's completely reversed. On your driving test, and indeed all the lessons you have, unless they've changed the rules and not told me, unless the ADIs have all decided to do something else, but you're told that you signal, and then, if you need to slow down in order to perform the action you've just wanted, you then slow down. You don't slam your brakes on and then decide, right, well, I've slowed down now, I'll tell the bloke behind why I'm doing it. It's signal, slow down. Not slow down, then signal. You may think it's unimportant until you get a lorry up your arse. David says, after all that rugby crap, I suppose the Oasis concert will be at Old Trafford. Those brothers often say how much they hate United, but at least they can get more bums on more seats. Well, that's true. That's true, isn't it? Because they do say it'll be a big un. Not only are they playing in your garden, we'll be knocking 7 bells out of Leonard Cohen before we start, Liam and Noel. When you say knocking 7 bells, do you mean hitting him or playing his tunes? Because you might have a bit of trouble with that, because some of them have music in. So you'd be kind of stuffed. It's not like doing Beatles songs that you think you've written. It's not the same. You know, some of Leonard Cohen's tunes have 2 chords. I know, 2 chords. How are you going to manage? Yeah, Lord above. Still, at least you can manage with a crap drummer. Can't you, if you do Beatles songs? Well, why not? The Beatles did. Yes, I know, everybody said he was a belter. Unfortunately, others disagreed. Good old Ringo. Hey, he's still alive. He's done better than 2 of them. 0161 228 2225. Somebody asked earlier, was anybody else at the Jean-Michel Jarre concert in Docklands so many years ago today? Well, Chris in Southport says, I went to the Jarre concert at Docklands, but I was only 16, so hopefully I'm forgiven. I also went to the other one he did at Main Road, which was crap. I'd learned my lesson by then. But maybe so, Chris, but apparently not quite in time. Jean-Michel Jarre. Mind you, I was jealous of him for a long while, because he was married to Charlotte Rampling. Ooh, she was pretty in my day. She probably still is. Yeah. And seeing as how you've mentioned things that happened on this day, including the Jean-Michel Jarre concert, did you know that on this day, This is true. On this day, 8th of October, 1891, the first street collection for charity took place in Britain. And guess where? Where else? Manchester and Salford. What was it for, do you think? There we are, Manchester and Salford, having a street collection, the very first one. Load of people get together and say, let's have a whip round. Let's get out in the street with a tin in Manchester and another one in Salford and ask people to put farthings in, because that's what it would have been in 1891. Put in a farthing and maybe a penny. Go over the top, a shilling. Dear God, you could live on that for a fortnight. Put one of them in, you'll be... Oh, just give us your shiny stuff. And what were they after? What were they helping? The vagabonds? The ragged-trousered kids and all that? No. The local hospital, perhaps? No. Maybe one of the other charities that help people who are destitute. Maybe the Salvation Army? No. Certainly not the RSPCA. No. More bizarre than that. The first street collection for charity in Britain took place on this day in 1891 in Manchester and Salford for Lifeboat Day. Ta-da now.
You'll find out the way to Amarillo. Tony Christie is in.